Good evening, everyone. Thanks for listening to this replay. We had a session earlier this morning that we wanted to record, but we didn't want to expose the people who were participating. So we're doing a rerun of the call this morning with Niels Sandqvist as the key speaker. What we will be covering is a solution called SafePass. It's been developed by Safehouse, of which Niels is a co-founder. The solution is an on-prem, it's installware. It is a number of different capabilities in one package, a cybersecurity related package. It is, if deployed, when deployed, you're not able to hack it. People have tried. And we protect your organization's users, and we protect your organization's resources that are on the internet or accessible via the internet. Now, I don't want to steal all the thunder. So Niels, please take it away. Tell us about what you have been developing together with Jimmy and others for a couple of years now, and I'm sure it's going to excite a number of people who are listening in.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, correct, Frederick. My name is Niels Sandqvist, and we can actually start in a completely different era because I entered the IT business in '82, and met very old guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and even Kenneth Thompson, who is the father of Unix. So I've been around for a long time. Also worked with security since mid '90s or so. First from network perspective, and then later from everything like deep packet inspection systems. I'm a SOC architect myself, so I've been involved very much in designing security operations centers and setting up tools and run books and a lot of other things. But it also leads me to where I am today, because when we found out that actually you can spend $1 billion on gadgets, cybersecurity solutions, stitch them together, then you still next morning get compromised. Being a techie and understanding how stuff works, and very good at asking questions, then we sat down and went through a lot of true or real life cases where companies has been compromised, hacked, and we went through the Metro attack framework, and we took them one by one and figured out how can we actually get rid of that kind of tactic or that technique or that process or procedure. So that became eventually SafePass, which we're going to show you today and talk a little bit about why we're doing this. So let me start by just sharing my screen and then give you some insights to some of the presentations that we have here. If we can get it to work, I hope so. Let's get up started here. So I will just launch it here so we have full screen. So first of all, we're called Safehouse. There's a reason for that. In intelligence community, a Safehouse is where you can actually do business hidden or clandestine, so you can actually have a safe operation. The C in Safehouse is because we also very much focused on zero trust, and we actually created and patented stuff like zero trust 5 years before John Kinderberg. He actually invented or coined zero trust in 2010. It has evolved since then. Also on our side, software defined parameter, deparameterization, a lot of other technologies like guardrail, microparameter, and comply to connect elements has been introduced and implemented in SafePass. There's a reason for that. First of all, one of the things that we can embrace ourselves with that is actually third-party validation and accreditation and certification being a platform that auditors have spent 10 months trying to compromise and haven't succeeded. Even though they have access to most of the source code, then they haven't been able to compromise the platform. We can't compromise the platform. So when you install it, it's installware. When you install it in an insurance company or defense contractor or things like that, you can call us and say, can you compromise this environment? And we have to say no. It's designed the way that we can't compromise it. Then when we are talking a little bit about what's the difference, maybe one of the key features here is actually that you're trying to defend your business with 30-year-old technology, and maybe it's older. So the way we think about parameter, the way we think about VPN, the way we think about firewalls, having a boundary, a parameter where we're trying to defend and build a fence around our assets, that's really not working anymore. And it is like going to war with an old fighter jet. It's loud, it's bulky, it shows up on all the radar screens. So the enemy will pretty fast detect you. And that's the same here. Hackers, they can scan your network, they can port scan you and network scan you and get a lot of information about what you have. Then they know about vulnerabilities, what vulnerabilities you have, and then they can actually exploit those. If you're looking on the right side, then you have a little bit of a newer fighter jet. It is not really showing up on radars. It's a small footprint, at least. It's stealth. It's modern. It's silent, sort of, at least. And it's low profile, efficient. It's fast, agile, and there's a lot of additional features in a modern airplane. And that's the same when we're talking about VPN. You access your network via VPNs today, most likely. It's very rare people are not doing that, but we're looking at something called VPC, Virtual Private Connectivity, which is like the stealth fighter to the right, and you're bound to the VPN, the old fighter jet on the left. So get into the new modern era that will actually be helping you a lot. So why are we talking about this stuff? We are talking about it because the old fighter jet, that's actually bound to what we call detect and response. Once something is detected, you can actually respond and mitigate it. And the industry is normally saying that if you cannot detect it, you cannot secure it. That's wrong. And that's one of the first parameters or points that we need to hook into. That is actually that if we don't want to change that, of course, we will still chase the bad guys around the network. But if we change that, how can we prevent the bad guys actually to get on the network? And the way we do that is actually in a proactive security model, and we call that prevent and protect. That is actually making sure that they can't find you. So even though they do port scanning, network scanning, they do reconnaissance and things like that, you will not show up on the radar screen. So that means that they will pretty fast move on to another victim, and that's not you. So that's one of the beauties about SafePath. That's actually what it's meant to do. So when you're looking at it from a point of view, then you have proactive security. We talked about that, and reactive. So you are in the reactive model today. So you respond after an attack has happened. So you throw the burglar out once he's in your house. We actually make sure that he cannot find the house. And then there's a lot of other things that reactive is primarily dealing with known threats. That means once we know that a bad actor is around, then we do something about it. But when we are in a proactive mode, then we actually are anticipating that even unknown threats, something we don't know, would actually not be able to harm us. And how is that? That is actually, again, if you can't attack what you can't see. So if there's nothing there, where do the IT terrorist, if there's nothing to actually place a bomb at, how are they going to attack it? So that is, of course, strengthening security end to end. And that's just a different model. It's a different way of thinking about how security is. It's very, very efficient. It's very, very strong. And again, we have more than 100,000 attempts trying to compromise SafePath till now, and none of them actually succeeded, and they're only scratching the surface. So we have 5 solutions. We have SafePath Prevent and Protect. That's the one we're going to talk about today. Then we have something called SafeMessenger. You can say that's a Telegram Signal, WhatsApp on steroids. It's actually installware. So you install it, you run it, you operate it, you have control of your data. So data sovereignty and data privacy, that's part of Safe Messenger. Nobody can actually look into it from the outside. So that means that you and I can actually exchange a file or a message, and when when somebody wants to look over our shoulders, then there's nothing there. So that's Safe Messenger. Safe Scanner and Safe Privilege, that is actually a scanner, so you can do all the infrastructure, get all the assets, and see what you have. And then Safe Privilege is actually an ADE, Active Directory cleanup tool. Because there's a lot of things happening from the AD side that we want to get rid of, like privileges, old admin accounts and things like that, and something that hasn't been used for maybe months or years, we can actually clean that up very safely. And then the last one is Safe Connect. That's an A2P business or communication platform as a service, where we distribute RCS feeds, iMessages, emails, marketings, and things like that. The point when we are talking about security is actually that once we're looking at how security is defined, then a lot of people are talking about it's risk based. They look for risk all over the place. And that's really not how it's efficiently working. Because when you're looking at, for instance, Secret Service or other people that are protecting a president or things like that, human beings, then they're actually concentrating on the asset. They're concentrating and trading on the VIP. So if something happens, they remove the VIP. That's their focus area, because there's too many risks. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much going on around them, so they can't mitigate it all. Otherwise, they need to be 200 people more, and then they still, can go badly wrong. So in the IT business or OT business, that's actually known knowns. That's where threats and vulnerabilities are. That's the detect response. That's where you have the control frameworks like the CIS-18 controls or the NIST and so on. And it's very nice to have that. It's completely okay, but it's known knowns. We know what we're looking for. We know what we need to mitigate. But the hackers don't work from that space. They work from the down here or down the bottom. And that's what we call unknown unknowns. So what you don't know, you don't know, and that means that the hackers know that there are some vulnerabilities or some holes in your armor, and they don't want to talk about it. They just exploit it, and maybe you don't know and they're not getting aware of that. So there's a huge impact base below the surface that you cannot see. Again, I'm a SOC architect. We have been measuring this stuff for years, and a security operation is actually just around 50% malware secure. So 50% of the malware is slipping through, and there's only one strike that needs to happen, then you're out of business. So really a lot of false sense security out there, and we need to change that. So when we are going to look at that. On the false sense of security side, then CrowdStrike actually was very okay, even though they messed up a little bit for a few months back, but otherwise then they've actually done some pretty good reports on how especially Russian hackers, but also North Korean, Chinese hackers are working, and one of the results they found out was actually that Russian hackers can infiltrate a computer network in less than half an hour. North Korean hackers and Chinese hackers take a little bit longer because they don't want to be found that fast, or they don't want to leave a footprint. The Russian hackers don't care. Cybercrime is the third largest economy on the planet after US and China, and even though the cybersecurity business is around $250 billion, then it estimated that the hackers they actually are having a turnover that's a revenue of $1.6 trillion, and they're ruining a lot more. Some of these numbers they're inflated because it can't add up with the global GDP. But anyway, that's another story. What is actually coming out here is actually that 1 hour cybercrime cost in 2001, it was around $2,000. In 2021, it was $787,000. This is an FBI report, and these numbers are only for US. That means that if we prorate that linearly out to 2041, then you are reaching around $300 million per hour for cybercrime cost. And nobody can afford that. So obviously something has to change. The problem is actually that's the curve. It's progressive, so it's actually going much faster than that, and that's another problem. So we need to react in the industry. You need to react actually to change from best practice to something better. What is better? So we have detect and response. That's on the right side here. So that's where the whole cybersec industry is working. They're detecting once the 0 day is detected, or breach is actually detected. Then it is being publicized, and the vendor can actually be aware of that and creating the signatures or the patches or whatever and distribute those. And then the IT admins out there in all the organizations, they're installing the patches. If we want to change that model, we need to go on the other side and say, how can we actually remove that a 0 day can actually harm us, have any impact? And you can only do that by taking control. And that means that you need to control how users are accessing your system, what and from where and from what device and on what attributes that needs to be parallel or packed into that. And they need to have a guardrailed approach. That means it's like a staircase. You have a 2 kilometers high staircase, and if you don't have any guardrails, I think we all will have shaky legs going down from that staircase. But if you have a good rail on both sides, then it's a little bit easy, at least. Could be still be a little bit frightening, but anyway, it's working out that way. And if you're using guardrail microparameter, then you will not be able to, or through that model, you will not be able to detect any vulnerabilities. And if you can't detect any vulnerabilities, you can't exploit them. And that's some of the rationale behind SafePass, prevent and protect. And it's not SafePass, it's just the prevent and protect is the definition of how we want to do this using guardrail microparameter and comply to connect and deparameterization. Can you say framework, models, methodologies to actually build that in? And that is all, built into the SafePass environment and the SafePass platform. It's completely transparent. You will not see it. It just is created that way. And the way it's actually created is if you have a burglar running around in a nice Danish small countryside, then they can look into the windows on through the windows and see if there's any nice painting from Van Gogh or Picasso or whatever, or any widescreen TVs or things like that. So they can build an inventory list and say, well, when I need to pick something up, I just go here to this house and do this and break in. If they want to do that in a SafePass environment, they need to be very, very, very good, because the thing is actually there's nothing they can look into. And that means they will not be able to find my Picasso, or they will not be able to find, my flat screen TV. This guy is either a Patriot or a sandbox. So you can select and choose between if you want to be the last house in the street that are running SafePass, or you actually are putting in a SafePass environment and then build a sandbox where you can actually monitor the bad guys and see what they're doing. That's also possible. We have a lot of can you say business partners? This is a little bit narrowed down. We have some projects that we have been part of in Poland and here in Europe. We are also an AWS and Microsoft partner, by the way. We're also part of CENSEC, which is a European organization for defense, space, and security, part of Cloud Security Alliance. I'm president of Cloud Security Alliance for the Danish chapter. And then we have some alliances and partners that are working together with us around the world. SafePass is a layer 7 technology. So that means that we are connecting to resources on layer 7. And then we capture that and we distribute that over the network, over the other layers. And that's completely what is called black transmission and black communication, black core. And that's Department of Defense terminology, where it's encrypted, of course, in many layers, and in using dynamic encryption keys that are constantly changing and rolling. Never the same key is never used or reused again. So you will, with that model, you will actually be eliminating a lot of attack vectors. Not all of them, but I would say 90% of all the attack vectors will actually be gone. There are no session hijacking. There's no brute force attacks. There's no man-in-the-middle attacks. There's no TCP/IP vulnerabilities. No IP spoofing, route, nor DDoS attacks. Yeah, they can happen, but it hasn't any impact on SafePass. So that's part of the benefits of using SafePass for that. The way it works a little bit, we will be doing a little bit deep dive on the next slides, but otherwise then you have a client, you have a user in one end, you have a communication pipe, and then you have a proxy or server or a gateway inside your firewall. The more you remove or put these firewalls towards the resource, so if this is a server and you place the proxy inside the server, the communications that are coming out of that server will now be encrypted and will not be able to be seen on the network. If you place the proxy in the DMZ or the DMZ, then you will actually be able to see what is going over the network traffic-wise, and can analyze on that and things like that. That's okay, no problem. You can also have several gateways. We can have up to 65,000 gateways in one solution, and each gateway can contain 65,000 groups. So scalability issues, that's not SafePass. There's also built-in load sharing, load balancing, fault tolerance, and a lot of other things. So it's automatically set up that way. SafePass is using what we talked about, VPC, Virtual Private Connectivity, and then it's by using a protocol called SSH2 on port 22. So that's actually the only port you need to have open. Nobody can see what is happening on that port from a SafePass perspective. They can't see if it's a Word document or a PDF file or Mission Impossible in streaming from Netflix going through that environment. That's not possible to see. It is going to be decrypted and shown in the appropriate can say application on the user end, and the SafePass is controlling all that from a user perspective. It's also being controlled from the backend side. So the IT guys, they're actually controlling how an application should be deployed. If it should be deployed from the backend side, that means pushed out and installed in memory and as a temporary, and then SafePass can remove everything again once you are shutting down the session. So there's no artifacts left on the PC or the device that the user is using. It could be they're coming from a user or a device we don't know, an internet cafe in Beijing. Then we probably don't want to have a lot of information residing on that device. It could also be a known device, and then we have maybe an encrypted share on the hard drive that we can push information into. I'll show you that on the demo. The way it works when the user is starting up, there's some attributes that needs to be evaluated and validated. So there's some roles and some personal things, people-wise, person-wise, user-wise. Then there's environmental fingerprints. That's the device, the environment, IP addresses, routers, internet routers or whatever, home IP, things like that. Then you can have data fingerprints. That means that we can look for specific files in a system, and if that's not present, then SafePass will not launch. If everything's okay, then when the user is clicking the SafePass launch or the binary, then it will actually connect to the logon gateway. The red line indicates that every time that this is being passed and say this is okay, you're coming from the right environment, everything is validated, it will shut down the connection. The same will happen between the logon gateway and the provisioning server or the security engine, the policy engine. Then whenever things has been moved over here and the policy engine is checking that you're coming from the right environment and have the right credentials and all kind of stuff, then it will shut down the connection all the way. And then we'll actually grant you access or deny you access. And if it grants you access, it will tell the gateways that are residing in front of the resources that and where the resources are configured that this user is actually entitled to get those resources. Please push them out. So they're coming from the backend side and being pushed out into the Launchpad from the user perspective. There's several ways that the Launchpads or widgets or the way that the user is actually seeing SafePass being deployed, but yeah, we'll come back to that. Looking at it from a little bit of a different angle, this is an OT environment. This is what is called Purdue model or the Purdue model. And what we are looking at here is actually that there's some manufacturing stuff here, there's some IT stuff here, and then you have between the SCADA systems and the LAN or local area network, you have between layer 2 and layer 3, you can actually place the SafePass gateways. But once you install SafePass, you will actually hide everything. That's the beauty about SafePass. That is, it starts by saying, okay, everything needs to be stealth. Everything needs to be, or the resources you define and configure into SafePass, that at least they are safe and they're stealth. So to make it very easy for you, we've just grayed everything out, the whole environment. Then when we are starting configuring what needs to happen, then you take specific elements and say, okay, this resource 1, I would like to highlight that. What you see is what you get. So VusiVyk is actually an old terminology in the IT business, but this is the same thing. What you see is what you get. So when you're configuring resource 1 and you're having a SafePass user to actually connect to that, you go to the provisioning server, create the menu item or the resource and tell the resource how it actually needs to be deployed. Then you're hooking that resource up to a gateway or group, and then you connect the user with the group. Very, very simple, and you can do that from Active Directory, synchronizing over, or whatever you like to do. There's a lot of options there. And then you can say you have an internal user. It's exactly the same. We don't differentiate between internal and external users. They are accessing exactly in the same way. So it will access the gateway, and the gateway can actually be residing either on this little box. It's an IPC127 from Siemens, industrial computer. No ventilation and no fans or anything. It's a very rugged little device with a lot of power. And you can place that in very dusty and oily and wet environments and things like that. It's still working. But you can also use a standard server, a virtual machine, and put SafePass on that. That's not a problem. The resources are defined, and that means that these are highlighted here, and they are shown this way. And that means you can connect users to it and control the resources, how they need to be deployed. So this resource could be available every Monday morning from 8 till 12 o'clock in the morning, and then it will vanish, disappear from the user's Launchpad. So it will not be accessible. Things like that you can do with SafePass. We don't want to talk so much about use cases right now, but if we talk to a high level, waterworks, supply chain mitigation, energy grid access, mitigation and management control, power stations. We have some clients here that are having like 900 or 1,000 power stations around the country, and they place the gateway in each of them and have access to them. And then they can be assured that they're the only one getting access to it, not the Russians, not North Koreans, not Danish guys or Swedish guys or US guys. Critical infrastructure, SOC efficiency, security operations center. That's my home turf. I want to make sure that the security operations they're being much more efficient and effective. So when we are removing like 90% of the attack surface, the remaining stuff, we can actually pretty much granular the security policies and the run books and the playbooks to actually very, very fast focus on things that are happening and are being an anomaly. MSPs, very efficient management of their customers and the hosting environments, and defense, they are mostly using it for controlling unclassified information, subcontractors and things like that. So CUI management, and also the certification from DoD called CMMC 2.0. That's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification 2.0, and SafePass supports that out of the box. Now we're beginning to get to the end and going to the demo. So let's just take you through this. There are like 10 of the the most dreadful attack forms here that SafePass they actually eliminate or is immune to. Immune to nation state attacks, immune to port scanning, network scanning attacks, malware, ransomware that cannot stick. If people understood how malware works, then it actually needs to communicate with some things outside the environment. Some malware doesn't have to do that, by the way. But the thing is, actually, it will still not be able to crawl into a SafePass session because it's not configured. So it will not be able to get access and get access through the gateway to get access to backend systems. So yes, a malware can compromise the device on the user side, and that's it. It will not be able to crawl back through the system. DDoS attacks, same thing. It will just flood the pipe. SafePass will, transmit slower. It will not break down or do anything except than just being very slow. But if you have a fault tolerant system and more than one gateway, then you will actually just transfer or automatically user sessions will be transferred to another gateway. Phishing has no impact. Well, again, we take the phishing from the Exchange server or mail server. We compress it, we encrypt it, and we send it to the user side, and that's where it will reside. And it will not be able to break into any systems from the backend side. Immune to code injection attacks. Immune to lateral movement, immune to man-in-the-middle attacks, and immune to brute force attacks, and also immune to infrastructure vulnerability attacks. So we're covering quite a lot here, and the people should try it. It's always very, very efficient to see how it works. Try to breach it, try to compromise it, see what happens, and many times nothing happens. So that's a good thing. The way we are looking at it from a strategic point of view, we embrace the NIST 2.0 or cybersecurity framework 2.0, and they have come with the governance side. We think it's a great idea to actually have the governance, risk management strategy or impact management strategy, policies, procedures, processes, information protection strategies, and things like that. Nicely, perfect. We are dividing things up in two layers. The threat management layer, that's on the infrastructure side, that's hardware, that's the network, that's the transportation. Down here, we call SafePass the data protection layer, and that means that we are concentrating on users, the access, and the data. How do we secure that, transferring and transmitting and storing and things like that. And then there's some reasoning. It could be that you're having some kind of compliance or regulations you need to live up to, then you put that into the security policy, and that's the reason for doing XYZ. We are, of course, also support recovering, so you can recover various data from, of course, a SafePass environment, backing it up, restoring it, and so on. That's, of course, fully part of the plan. We also have a safe scanner, and the safe scanner we use this way. So whenever we are setting up a SafePass environment, we want to see, okay, where are the servers, where are the critical stuff, what's the IP addresses, what is the service ports and things like that. And that's something that some organizations have very good control of. Some also don't have that. So we can use the Safe Scanner to actually just over the 2 weeks period, we are scanning the whole network, and then we can actually just look in the data from the Safe Scanner side, and we can detect everything that is going on and every asset you're having. Then we can really, really fast configure SafePass and set it up and apply the security policies and make sure that everything is working. And then you can rescan that after you put stuff into the SafePass environment. We call that the protect surface. If you don't have things in SafePass, we call that attack surface. But once you have it in SafePass, it's a protect surface, and then you can start rescanning that, and you can see the documentation that, for instance, an ERP system that is moved into the SafePass environment will now not be able to be scanned. It will be gone from the surface, and that means that your environment is a little bit more secure. That's it. Don't want to talk too much about these the elements anymore. Well, let's go into and show you how it works. So basically, we have two files that you need to pay attention to. That is the extended connectivity binary, and then we have a safehouse XSRD, which is a site identity file. When we launch, we will see that the binary is now checking up with the server in Germany and coming back in a moment and saying, hey, listen, I'm okay. You're coming from the right environment with the right DNA. And then it prompts me and say, I need to make sure that you're you. So I will put in my credentials. We don't need long, complex password. So mine is safehouse123 with capital C, by the way, and you're welcome to get it. You will not be able to use it. You are welcome to get my agent. You're welcome to get my environment, except that if you have my computer also, then you will be able to log in. But now let's log in. Now it's building the environment fingerprint. That is my device. All the things that is picking up from my side. You can go to the 598818 and try to hack that. That's our server. That's where we are running our business and our demo systems and everything. And here you can see that it's generating a lot of things and mounting some drives and a lot of other things. And now we have access to resources. So now it's being populated from the backend side that we have access to any resource. We can launch and or LibreOffice Excel type thing. And you will get that, and you can do stuff like that. We can close that down again. Don't save that. We can launch other things that we want to edge by proxy. So if you want to browse through the SafePass environment, you just launch a browser, and you can just say bbc.co.uk, and bang, you will get access to BBC. But this environment is now controlled by SafePass. So let's disconnect that as well. And let's look at the backend side, at the admin side, because that's maybe a little bit more interesting to see. You can literally launch anything here. Cameras, surveillance stuff, IoT devices, getting access to that, various PLCs, any application that you would like and can dream of, we can launch that. And we have various ways to actually launch them. Now we're looking at the backend side. So when you're setting up SafePass, there's a lot of information you can talk about. Site settings. You saw the site identity file was called Safehouse. We have some devices here, and notice that we automatically remove the adoption of new devices automatically. So that means if you want to have all devices adopted automatically, you just tick this box, and then you're good to go. We don't have that. From default, it's denying all devices. And that's also why you can try to compromise our IP address, because your device is not recognized. It's not showing up anywhere. And it's not going to be approved. So no matter what you try to do, you will not be able to get in. Authentication-wise, we have several other things you can do there. Policies, you can create long, complex password if you like. And roll them and penalize the users how many times they want to adopt a new password and so on, or actually tap it in again. There's some role users, secure device or secure drives. That's the SafePass drive that I have down here. That is something that we can allow all SafePass users, or only my computer or this user, and we can have various applications to actually use that environment as well. And then I'll show you a little bit about what we're picking up on the log side. So the whole device fingerprint, that is a little encrypted file here that is being compromised, or not being compressed by SafePass. And then we are picking up public IP, private IP, machine MAC addresses, serial numbers, OS serial numbers, product keys, all sorts of things. And you can actually just also look at patch levels. And if the patch level is not up to your standard, you can actually just grab the patch, ask SafePass to deploy it, and then you can actually run SafePass afterwards, after the patch has been deployed. So that's up to you how you want to do that. Settings, let's go in here. Device adoption queue, you saw that before, and you can actually approve and reject devices if you like. We can also go in and talk a little bit about the rules editor. So here we have various rules. You can add a new rule and you can play around with that. It can be role-based, user-based, it can be like function-based, and there's a lot of things here. And it will even be extended, this rule editor, in the next version with a lot of other things. So it's very, very comprehensive. Let's go a little bit, we'll just close this session and then we do this screen and then we go into the user side here. So you can see I have access on this gateway, I have access to 3 groups. These are the groups here, staff on the road, to terminal service access and SafePass admin. But the thing is actually, there's actually also a Nils group here. I don't have access to that. It's not configured to me in this environment. And I also have some dead tests that I can use. But let's move on and go into the menu side. So let's take the gateway again. The green gateway, when you're looking at it, is actually the ones that are active. You can have 65,000 of those gateways, but the green ones, they're the ones you have access to and can access. Menu items, or what we call resources. So that means, again, when you're looking at a resource on the road, you have these 7 resources here, and they're equal to the one that you're having here. And if you want to apply another resource, you simply just drag and drop, and bang, here you go. And it's not over here at this point of time. It's still 7 here, but you can just refresh the menu, or every time you move in the network to get another connection, it will automatically update the resource list. And now you will see that I have access to LibreOffice calculation number 2, or version 2. It's the same LibreOffice, same application. You can just apply different security policies to it. Then we can go in and talk a little bit about, what is a menu item? How do we configure that? So you call it a menu title. You are defining kind of if it's Windows or Mac OS or an iPhone or an iPad application. You create an icon. You define some parameters, working directory and things like that. And then you can apply different things here, like only download this, binary if the executable doesn't exist on the user PC. So that means that if the user don't have Word, you can just grab Word from the backend side and then deploy it and launch it in memory and get his Word documents, and they can operate on that. And then you can close down the session again, and everything is being removed. So you do that down here. Delete downloadable application upon exit. You can add some, you can also put in some scripting and some commands before launching. Please check if this computer is running some nasty software like Mimikatz or any other hacker tools or Shodan, whatever. And you can look for that and say, okay, we don't want to launch in this nasty environment. And then you just put a screen up on the user side and say, this computer is too infected. Please find another one. You can also launch some commands afterwards. So if you say, I'm sitting in an environment where I need to control that nobody's able to do anything afterwards, you can fire off some delete commands and stuff like that. You can run this with debug logging. So that's what we did in the beginning. You saw that in auto start, and there's other things you can do. There's an advanced option where you can create various targets, delete targets. You can create mapping from one domain name server to another one or whatever. So there's a lot of additional things you can do as well. And then you can again define packages based on what you want to deploy. And once you have that, then everything is working on that way, or in that way. That's basically it. I don't want to talk so much about a lot of other things. When you add a menu item, it's very easy. You just create it from scratch. You can also just copy a menu item, and you just open and right click and copy menu item, and then you call this number 10, and then bang you go, and here you have Office Calc number 10. Same, residing the same place. You just want to maybe deploy this to a different group. That could be an external party or whatever. And that's the way to do that. It's very easy, very intuitive. And the people that are working with this stuff, they are pretty happy because again, the user interface is pretty clear. We were asked a few years back to delete another very nice, graphical user interface, because the technicians that are used to work with this stuff, they are very, very happy just being in a menu or being in a window, and they just right click and then do what you need to do there, instead of going up in a menu and have a drop down and then do this and another drop down and then you execute. This is much faster and much more easy. That's all I want to show you. Thank you very much for seeing this stuff. Any questions? Then let's take that. I don't know. We have of course recorded this session for you to look into it. I will close down.
Yeah, Niels, I do have a question. How would this look if I wanted to include MS 365? Right? I mean, how could I have that as a resource?
We can we can look at it from this perspective, because you just place a gateway either on Azure or in an Azure environment. Then you're behind Microsoft's big firewall, and then you configure the port from where you're picking up the Office 365. You go into the Office 365 and you define on the API what IP address that is allowed to access that environment, and you hook the two together. And that means that the users will not be able to go around. They will have to, or they're forced to go to the Office 365 environment through a SafePass proxy server. And that means that you can control that security much better, at least. There's also other can you say services like Gmail where you can't do that. We can't put a gateway behind the Google server or the Google firewall. So for instance, users that are accessing Gmail, they will always be able to access the Gmail around the SafePass environment. You can configure it, but it doesn't make sense. But that's a lot of the things that SafePass can do. Salesforce can do the same thing as Microsoft Office 365, so you can actually place a gateway and have access to that. There's a lot of other very great services out there that are capable of doing the same.
Yeah, among that Zoho as well. So
Zoho, exactly. So there's again a lot of ways that you can actually control these environments through the SafePass environment. You can either use it as the dual reverse port forward proxy, or you can actually do it on the SOCKS 5 proxy. Both things are available in SafePass. And you can control either the browsing or browser window via the SOCKS 5 proxy, or you can actually have native applications distributed and launched in many different ways. One of the use cases is actually that in the defense industry, where you have CUI data, you have, for instance, a blueprint that is you can place that with the Chinese subcontractor in the SafePass library or in the folder that you have. Yeah, well, it doesn't work that way. So you can actually place that in the folder. 1 second, see if we can get that. Come on. So when you had the SafePass share down here, you would actually be able to say, okay, fine, I need to place some documents here on the Chinese subcontractor's computer. And then you launch SafePass, or they launch SafePass, they get the CAD/CAM application coming from Denmark or Sweden or wherever, and then it would be launched into memory in the Chinese side. It will look into the file for the blueprint, and it will launch the blueprint, and it will be shown that way. But the application itself will never be installed or not be present in that Chinese computer. And whenever the session is closing down, everything is removed again, and the data is being placed back in the SafePass folder on the local machine. And when the SafePass session closes, that drive disappears. You will not be able to find it, and you will not be able to get access to the data that is inside that file share. It is only controllable, or it's only accessible when the SafePass session is running, and that means that is the or the vendor in Denmark or Sweden that is controlling the access to that environment. And once the Chinese subcontractor has done what he needs to do, then they just terminate the connectivity or terminate the connection, and that drive will never show up again. It will just be a blank space on a Chinese computer somewhere on the planet. Okay, that's basically what I have for you guys today. Any other questions, Frederick? You remember talked about?
No, I think we covered the key things. So thank you very much, Nils, and we'll be sharing this with the participants of this morning. But in general, anybody else who wants a on-demand presentation of SafePass. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, and we will of course also include some links to some of the videos that are out there on YouTube and so on. So you will get a lot of information besides this recording. Thank you very much. Speak to you later. See you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.